All right, here we go again for another edition of Mr. Clendenning's History Readings. This chapter is chapter 13. The country grows larger. In the last section, we read about the election of 1844. 1840, excuse me, where they started using billboards and slogans. William Henry Harrison was first elected, and then John Tyler takes over president. And then we have the couple disputes between America and Great Britain over the East Coast and the West Coast. James Polk, and the American belief of manifest destiny that it should stretch from the East Coast to the West Coast. And then there's a dispute over Oregon, in other words, where the border of Canada is today on the West Coast. Finally, this leads into some conflict with Mexico, which is what this section is about. So, lesson 2, ongoing trouble with Mexico. One of the words is insults. An insult is an action that upsets others. We'll be learning about women's rights and how they got started. We'll be learning about the Mexican War. It was a Mexican War. We'll be reading about General Winfield Scott, how the Mexican War ended. And you can see the results of the Mexican War in the years there. Answering those map questions. And what do you think? So that's kind of it for this section. All right, here we go. When Santa Anna surrendered to Sam Houston in the War of Texas Independence in 1836, he had agreed that the Rio Grande River was the boundary between Mexico and Texas. Later, he said the boundary was the Nueces River, which gave Texans far less territory. Texans would not accept the new Mexican boundary. The Republic of Texas became part of the United States in 1845. Texas was the 28th state to join the Union. Slavery was allowed in Texas. Many Americans were against the state joining the Union because of this slavery issue. However, the border dispute was a more pressing problem. After Texas joined the Union, remember the Union means the United States, some people feared there would be a war with Mexico. President Polk was eager to settle the Texas boundary dispute with Mexico. At the same time, he wanted to see if that country would sell California to America. He thought that Mexico, which needed money, would be willing to sell the land. The president sent John Slidell to Mexico City in 1845. As Polk's personal representative, Slidell could offer up to $25 million as payment for California. The Mexican officials refused to see him. President Polk did not take this insult to the United States lightly. Here's about women's rights. It happened in history. Pioneers in women's rights. On page 268, you will read about the Seneca Falls Declaration of Sentiments of 1848. It was one of the first documents relating to women's rights. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was at the Seneca Falls Convention. When she met Susan B. Anthony in 1851, they became partners in a long effort to win the right of women to vote. They did not live to see their dream come true. Stanton died in 1902 and Anthony in 1906. It was not until 1920 that the 19th Amendment granted women the right to vote, more than 70 years after the Seneca Falls Convention. So that's a picture of Susan B. Anthony on the left and Elizabeth Cady Stanton on the right. So 19th Amendment gives women the right to vote, 1920. Kind of easy to remember. All right, what was the Mexican War? Polk ordered General Zachary Taylor to advance his army beyond the Nueces River toward the Rio Grande in January 1846. The Mexican army remained quiet. February and March passed, there's still no action. Finally, on April 25th, 1846, Mexican troops crossed the Rio Grande and killed many of General Taylor's soldiers. The United States, in turn, declared war with its southern neighbor on May 3, 1846. This was the beginning of the Mexican War. Polk still wanted to extend the United States to the Pacific coast. Remember, that's manifest destiny. He ordered American troops to invade California. The troops were led by Stephen W. Kearny, John D. Sloat, and John C. Fremont. They had very little trouble defeating the Mexicans. Meanwhile, Zachary Taylor fought his way into Mexico. Old Rough and Ready, as he was called, won a major victory for the Americans at Buena Vista. In early 1847, General Winfield Scott led a charge on Mexico City. Scott was an expert in preparing for battles. Because of his complete attention to every last detail, he was known as Old Fuss and Feathers. At that time, many believed he was the country's most capable general. In September, Scott and his troops captured Mexico City. So that's General Winfield Scott, Old Fuss and Feathers. How did the Mexican War end? Mexico, which had a new government, finally was ready to make peace. President Polk had sent Nicholas P. Trist to negotiate a treaty. In 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was presented to Congress. In the treaty, Mexico would turn over California and all the land between Texas and California. Mexico also agreed that the Rio Grande was the southern boundary of Texas. The United States paid Mexico $15 million for the land. Polk suggested that the treaty be accepted. Congress agreed to the treaty in 1848. The United States now stretched from coast to coast. Mexican War. So you can see that's the years, 1846 to 1848. So that's the when. Here's the Rio Grande River. There's a Nueces River. So that's where, this is that disputed area. So in other words, where this blue line is where Mexico thought it should be. And this line in the Rio Grande is where it is today, and also where the Texans agreed with Santa Anna that it should be when they fought the Mexican army and won. So you can see the difference, and that's what they're fighting over, is this boundary. Then the rest of this is the modern day border with Mexico and America. This land was gained as a result of the Treaty of Guadalupe in 1848. Okay, so all this was gained for $15 million as a result of fighting the Mexicans in the Mexican-American War. What city did General Taylor reach? So if we're looking at the lines, you would see a couple of different lines, right? So this yellow one is Fremont. This one here is Kearney. Here's Scott. And here's Taylor. What did he reach? Buena Vista. Where did General Scott begin his advance? Well, this is where he ended. You might remember he invaded Mexico City, that's the capital, and he starts at New Orleans, or at the mouth of the Mississippi. All right? Okay, what do you think? Do you think all of Mexico should have been turned over to America after the war? Explain your answer. So you might say no, because they were fighting over this disputed land. You might say yes, because we beat them in the war. Okay? But I'd be asking for quite a bit to just take over the country when really all we were fighting for was this land. Okay, I will let you do the lesson 2 review on your own. Good luck.